Welcome back to Winning Law. I'm attorney David Nguyen with offices in Houston, Texas. And a few weeks ago, one of our viewers requested that I provide instructions on how to fill out and complete the form I-130, Petition for Alien Relative. Now, if you are a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, you would use this form in order to petition for your spouse, your parents, or your children. So let's see how I would do this. If I'm an individual without an attorney, this is what I would do. First, you would go to USCIS.gov. Once you're on this website, you're going to click on Forms. Once you go to Forms, click on All Forms. And then you're going to type in the form I-130. So here you see it. It's the I-130 Petition for Alien Relative. You're going to click on here. And I would always recommend that you don't use the file online. I always recommend to mail it in person because if you mail it by post, you will have an exact copy of whatever immigration receives. When you file online and immigration does whatever they want to it, it may not look the same when it actually reaches an officer. So again, if I were you, I would go ahead and mail this in by post versus filling it out online. Here, what I would also do is look through and read all of these documents here. So one of the major things I would do is first, you will look at edition date. So this is very important. Right before you mail out your I-130 petition, look at the edition date because these forms, they get updated periodically and you don't want to send in an old form. So if you had this form for a while and you haven't had a chance to submit it, go ahead and check the bottom of the form to make sure that the current edition date is the one that you're using. You don't want to send immigration the wrong edition because they're going to reject the petition. Next, you will see instructions for Form I-130 here, Form I-130 and Form I-130A. So before you get started, go ahead and read over the instructions. The instructions can change time and time again. And sometimes the rules and the instructions don't actually correlate with what you should do. So when I go over the I-130 petition, I'll go over what you should and how you should fill out the form. The I-130A form, remember, if you're filing this for your spouse, whether or not you're a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, you need to file the I-130 petition along with the form I-130A supplement. Again, this is only for people filing for their spouses. So if you're filing for your parents or your children or your siblings, you do not need to submit the I-130A. So let's go ahead and click on the form I-130. And just another tidbit, if you are a U.S. citizen and you're using this form to file for your spouse and your children, you have to fill out individual forms. However, if you are a lawful permanent resident, you only need to fill out this form for your spouse and any children or any child that's over the age of 21. So just remember, if you have children and they're under 21 and they're unmarried and they are with just your spouse, then you just have to fill out the form I-130. You don't have to fill out individual I-130 petitions for each one of your children. So let's go ahead and continue. So first, you want to skip all of this. You see how it says select this box if a G28 is attached. A G28 is an attorney representation form. So obviously this information and the attorney's information is all going to be blank. If you have an attorney though, if they don't have a USCIS account number, it's a red flag. It means that they don't file a lot of immigration applications or petitions, or else they would have this particular number. Next, when you go down here, it's asking in part 1 if you're filing and who you're filing for. So if you're filing for a spouse, click here, parent, click here, brother or sister or child. Remember, this form also works for stepchildren. So if you got married to the foreign national parent before those children turned 18, you can use this form to file for those stepchildren. Next, if you're filing for a child or parent, you want to answer these questions. Next, it says If the beneficiary is your brother or sister, or you're related by adoption, if it doesn't apply to you, go ahead and click, don't even mark anything. You can leave it blank. Next, if it doesn't apply to you, you can leave it blank. You don't actually have to put no. Next, it says about you, if you're the petitioner, to fill out the alien registration number. Remember, if you were not born inside the United States and you were born abroad, most likely you have an alien registration number. Look at your naturalization certificate, look at your prior lawful permanent resident or green card. This number should be somewhere on those documents. If you don't have it, you might want to speak with an attorney, because not having certain information on your petition or application will slow down the processing of that petition. Next, USCIS account number. If you had signed up for a My USCIS account number or account before, then you would have this. Most people haven't, so you can leave this blank if you want. Next is your social security number. Don't guess. You want to take a look at your social security card and make sure you enter in the right number. Moving down, your full name. Remember, they're asking for a last name first, then your first name, and then full middle name. Remember, don't just put your middle initial. I see a lot of people do this. And here, other names used, and this is for you, the person that's filing this. So the U.S. citizen or green card holder person needs to fill this out. If you use any nicknames, even if they're not your legal name, you need to fill this out. So let's say, for example, your name is Jonathan and you go by John at work and your friends know you by John. You need to put the name John down here under first, other given name. Next is asking you for your city and town of birth. So remember, they're asking for the city or town of birth. Next is going to be country of birth, and this is where I see people make a mistake. Instead of country of birth, they end up putting the state of birth. So remember, if you were born in the US, they're not asking you for the state anywhere. Here, they're asking you for city and country. Next, date of birth, you want to make sure that you use a double-digit month, day, and 4-digit year. For example, if your birthday was on January 1st, you want to, do something like this. All right. Next, you want to select your gender. And immigration is not too particular about your gender. So if you prefer a different pronoun, you can select one or the other. They're not going to be too particular with this particular option. Next, for your mailing address, go ahead and just enter it in. This is a mistake that I see often. So let's say, for example, this person's named John Smith. So they put down their address, right? We'll just make it up. And they'll put care of John Smith. It makes no sense, because if you're the only one living there, and this is not somewhere that you just send your mail to, you don't need to fill out this in care of name. Additionally, make sure that you select the appropriate boxes for the apartment, suite, or floor number. I see a lot of people, they'll enter in an apartment number, but they'll forget to forget to select one of these options. So you want to just fill that out. And you can already see an issue with this form. Notice how I can't even enter in an apartment number. So this just shows you, how sometimes even if you do something correct and you follow immigration, it doesn't always work out. And then, so if this is the case, when you print out this form before you mail it in, you're going to manually write in your apartment number. Then you're going to enter in your city or town, and then you're going to use this drop-down box to select the state and enter in your zip code. If you're inside the United States, you won't have a province and you won't have a postal code, but you will have a country. So go ahead and put in United States. You can do this. You can also abbreviate it by putting USA, and I think that's fine. Is it the same as your physical address? So if you're living here as your physical address, go ahead and click on yes, all right? Another thing that I want to bring up right away is I had this argument with this potential client a few years ago. She was an attorney in Greece, and she told me that she read over the form instructions and it indicated that you should put the word NA when not applicable. So let's say, for example, there's no city where you were born. You could put NA. And that's what the form instructions also say, is to put NA. However, I attended a training session with immigration a few years ago, and we asked them this particular question, and they indicated that they actually prefer that you don't put NA on certain areas and just leave it blank. So this is just my 2 cents, is that at our office we don't put down NA in all of the spots. So let's say, for example, they're asking you at this question here, please provide your physical address for the last 5 years. Again, physical address, not mailing address. So you want to go ahead and put all of this in. So let's calculate 5 years from June 28, 2023. So 5 years from today would be June 28, 2018. So you just take today's date and you subtract 5 years. So let's just say this person lived at this address, 123 Main Street, for the last, see how here it allows you to put down the number. Shows you how bad immigration is sometimes. And let's just go ahead and click on Texas, and we'll make up a zip code. And then country, again, you could put United States. Right, you can also use that wording for United States. Notice that province and postal code, I'm not putting NA in those slots. If you want to, they're not going to ding you for it, but do you have to? No. And notice how here it covers the last 5 years. So I wouldn't need to put NAs in any of these boxes if I didn't want to. If you do, it's perfectly fine. Here it asks you how many times have you been married. So if you are filing this for your spouse and you were married before, that means that you would have been married, twice. Okay, so you could put down 2 or a different number. And you also have to put in the number if you got a divorce and then you remarried the same person. It still counts as a different marriage. So put down the total number of times you got married. Next is asking you for your marital status. And this is where I also see people get in trouble. Remember, single is if you have never been married. Married is if you are married and you are living together. Divorced if you are no longer married and you're properly and legally divorced. Widow means that your spouse passed away. And separated means that you're married but you're no longer living with your spouse. And annulled means that you got married one time but the court determined that the marriage was invalid. So make sure that you are very careful with the selection of married and separated. Next is asking you for current date of marriage. Look at your marriage certificate if you're not sure. Here, place of your current marriage, you're looking for city, state, and country. Remember, if you were married in the US, there are no provinces, so you would leave this blank. Or you could select NA. Next is asking you names of all your spouses. So it's asking you here, put the name of your current spouse first. So you want to put the person that if you're filing this for a spouse, put their name here and their information here. And then, your prior spouse is here. And here you'll notice date marriage ended. So if you're still married, you're just going to leave this thing blank. Next is asking you about your parents. So it doesn't really matter if you put down your father or your mother first. You see how it allows you to select the male or female genders. But you do want to put in the last name first name, and then full middle name. Just like last time, you want to be very careful. Another thing that you want to be careful about is the birth dates. Every country except for the United States, they enter in the day first, month second, and year last. However, in the US, they will like it month first. That's why you see MM here. Day second, and then year last. So make sure that you are following the US format. Here's asking about the name of parent 2. Now, if you do not know the name of your father or your mother, you're more than welcome to put NA and all of these blanks are unknown. I think both will work for immigration. Next is asking you, again, the person that's filing this petition, if you are a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident. Remember, a lawful permanent resident is also another term for green card holder. Next is asking you how you received your citizenship if you are a citizen. So if you're not a citizen, you will skip questions 37 all the way up to 39C. All right? And here's asking if you are a green card holder, then you would complete this information down here. Next, it's going to ask about your employment history. So you want to put down the name of your employer, and all of this information is required. Remember, province and postal code may not be applicable. So most addresses in the US have zip codes, but we don't have postal codes. Next, for occupation, I see another issue with this. People usually like to be very general. So they'll put something like, what do? They put in business. You know, that's very generic and it doesn't really tell immigration what you do. I would always be very specific. You can put on here maybe IT specialist, right? If that's what your job title is. You could put HR manager. But whatever you do, always make it specific. Next, you want to enter the date of your employment. So if you can't remember the exact day, but you know the year and the month, you can always use 01 as a placeholder. So let's say I knew I started in January, I'm not sure what month. You can always do this. Put 01 as a placeholder like this. And just remember what the government's asking for. They're asking for employment history for the last 5 years. So you want to make sure that you include all periods of employment and unemployment in your 5-year history. They shouldn't have to look at this application or this form and there'll be gaps that are unexplained. You need to provide your entire employment history. And just a tip, if you are not sure, call your prior employers. It's that easy. Or maybe request a credit report, and maybe that will show you some of the places that you worked before. Next is asking if you're Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino. Here, race, I think people get upset about this. So you see here, there's no race for Hispanic or Mexican. Let's see, not Asian Pacific. Well, there is Pacific Islander. So just note that if you are Hispanic, you have to select white. All right, according to immigration, you have to select white, unless you identify with other ones. And again, it says select all applicable boxes. So I know some Filipinos, they like to select other Pacific Islander and Asian. You can select both if you want, or you can select one or the other. Honestly, I don't think it makes a big deal. Next, your height, remember, is in feet and inches, and next, your weight in pounds. Remember, I understand that some countries use kilograms, but you definitely want to use pounds. Next, you want to look at your eye color. You want to just select the best option for you. Next is your hair color. And sometimes people tell me, what if I dye my hair? I don't think it matters. So if you dyed your hair black and it's currently black, you want to go ahead and select black. If you dyed your hair and it's red, go ahead and select red. So it doesn't really matter what you were born with, the color of it. Next is asking for information about the person that you're sponsoring, which is also called the beneficiary. You can see here there's an alien registration number. Now, if that foreign national has ever been inside the US or been in removal proceedings or applied for work authorization, then they may have an alien registration number, which is either a 8 or a 9-digit number. If you don't have it or you don't remember it, you can leave this blank. However, remember, if you do have an alien registration number and you don't include it here, there may be issues with your case. And what I've seen before is that sometimes a person will be assigned 2 alien registration numbers. Like they'll be in removal or deportation proceedings, they'll be assigned an alien registration number. Later on, they apply for a government benefit. Let's say this a spousal petition, and they don't remember their alien number, so they don't put anything there. Later on, the government is going to issue them a second alien registration number, and it becomes an issue because later on you're supposed to tell immigration to merge those 2 alien numbers, which is more complicated than it sounds for immigration to do. Next, you'll see a USCIS account number. Again, if that foreign national already has a My USCIS account, then you can complete this here. If not, you can leave this thing blank. Here, Social Security number, again, if they ever worked in the US. With a Social Security card, you can enter in that number here. You don't want to enter in if they're using a fake Social Security number. You definitely don't want to put that fake number in there if it belongs to someone else. Next is asking for their full name. Remember, full last name. One important thing to note is Hispanic last names. Usually if you are Hispanic, you would have a two-part last name. So just make sure that you make it consistent with your birth certificate or your passport, or else you're going to have issues down the road when you're trying to apply for immigration benefits. Here, other names used again. Remember, you have to include nicknames and other names used. So for example, if you're Hispanic and you have your last name is, let's just say it's Garcia Lopez, but you usually go by just Garcia. You want to go ahead and put it under other names used. That sometimes you go by Jose Garcia, and not the full last name. So if you had Garcia, I'm not sure if you use a hyphen or not. If you do, put it in. Mick, okay? So let's just say sometimes your other names use Jose Garcia. All right, so let's move on. And then here it's asking about the beneficiary, what city were they born in, the country. Remember, it's not asking about state or province here, so do not, enter in other things here if it doesn't apply. Next, date of birth. Remember, month first, day second, year last. Next, their gender. And then has anyone ever filed a petition for the beneficiary? So let's say, for example, you're filing a spouse petition, but this person previously had a spouse that filed for them and it was denied, or they had their parent or sibling file for them, then you would select yes. If you're not 100% sure, there is an option for unknown. I would rather you select unknown than no if you're not 100% sure. This way it will avoid issues later on. Here is asking for the beneficiary's physical address. So you want to fill this in as much as possible. If you're filling this out and the person later on is requiring a consular appointment abroad for a visa interview, this is very important because they're going to have to mail out some of the notices to them. And if you put down the wrong address, the notices will be misdelivered. So you want to fill all of this out. And remember, some countries have provinces and postal codes. Next, you want to go in and is asking for asking for the address where the beneficiary intends to live. So if you're filing for this for your spouse, it's definitely going to be your current address. If you're filing this for a relative and they want to live with you, you want to fill this out. You can also put in the word same. Usually in our office, we just put in the word same like this and then skip the rest of it. Here is asking for the beneficiary's address outside of the U.S. So let's say, for example, the beneficiary lives in the U.S. already, is already here, and you're filing for adjustment of status. You can go ahead and click same here. If not, and they're abroad, you definitely want to fill out all of this information. All right, and the next is asking how many times has a beneficiary been married. Just like before, you're going to select it. And remember, marital status, you definitely want to fill out all of this, pick one that best fits the case. See here, date of marriage. If married, make sure you fill this out. Here's asking for place of current marriage, city, state, province, and country. Remember, if province doesn't apply, don't select anything. Next, you see here, it says names of beneficiary spouses. So this is where I see people make a mistake too. So let's say, for example, you are married to a foreign national and you're filing this form for them. So your information is already on page 1, right? You put down your name here and everything, and then you filled out the information for your spouse down here. And you would think, when you get to page 6, you don't have to fill anything out. However, you would be wrong. You have to actually fill out this information all over again. Remember, start with your current spouse or the person you're filing this for, if that person's the spouse, and then your ex-spouse is here. See here, and it's asking for the beneficiary spouse children again. So again, if you have to fill out this information here, if it's your information, you still have to put it here, and any children. Now this is very important. You want to put all of your beneficiary's children. This includes any child. So if that child is over 18, if they're no longer living, if they're no longer living with them, if your spouse doesn't know where they live now, even if they're born outside of the marriage, you have to put every single child down here that's ever existed. So just be very careful with that. Sometimes I see people say things like, oh, I thought I only had to include children that were overseas. I thought that I only had to include my biological children. No, you have to include every child, including stepchildren. So if you are filing this for your spouse and you have children from another relationship, you have to put down those children as a stepchild here under children. So just be very careful, because this section is where a lot of people get in trouble. Next, we're going to go down to beneficiaries entry information. If that person is currently inside the U.S. or ever been in the U.S., you want to select the appropriate option. How did they arrive? Let's say, for example, there's a pull down here. Apparently, most people come in as a B2 visitor. So here you go, B2 visitor. See here, I-94 arrival departure number. So how do you get this I-94 arrival departure record number? So what you can do is go to google.com. You're going to type in I-94 arrival departure record. And remember, just a couple months ago, the government is no longer giving people stamps in their passport. When you come into the U.S., remember, your visa expiration date does not control how long you can stay in the country. Your I-94 expiration date does. So again, what you would do is, where it says I-94, you're going to get your passport. You're going to go to this website from the Customs and Border Patrol. You're going to click on Get Most Recent I-94, read the disclaimer, click Acknowledge and Agree, enter in your information here. And once you click Next, it's going to tell you what your I-94 arrival departure number is, and also the expiration date, or the date that you're supposed to leave the U.S. So make sure that you fill out all this information. Okay. So let's moving on. It's asking for passport information, all of this stuff that you should know, because you need all that information to get the I-94. Travel document number. You may not have a travel document number, so you could put NA for this if you wanted to. Country of issuance is usually your home country where you receive the passport, and the passport expiration date. Make sure that you put it in this format. Next, asking for the beneficiary's current employment. If they're unemployed, you want to go ahead and put down that they're unemployed, and then the start date of their unemployment. But if they are employed, you want to fill out all of this information. Next is asking if the beneficiary, the person that you're filing this for, if they've ever been in removal or deportation proceedings. So enter yes or no. This is very important, because if they are currently in removal proceedings, or they previously were in deportation proceedings, there is a chance that even if you file this, they will not receive a green card unless you take care of the removal proceedings. So again, anytime that you are in or previously in removal proceedings, make sure that you check with an immigration attorney to make sure that the case has been closed, terminated, or dismissed before you continue with this process. Here's asking you the type of proceeding: removal, exclusion, rescission, where it occurred. So where was the immigration court located? So if it was Houston, you put in Houston, Texas, and the date of the proceedings. Here, and you should also include any documents you received from the proceedings, like the notice to appear, the NTA, or the decision, or the judge's order. You want to include as much as you can with your petition. That way they can locate your case. Again, you don't want the government to have to issue 2 alien registration numbers for the foreign national, because in the end it may cause confusion and it may take them a lot longer to receive their green card. Next is asking for the beneficiary's address in their native language. So this is important now if it's not in Western characters. So if the address uses Western characters, so let's say it's in Mexico and it's 123 La Tienda, I'm just making this up, I don't know, Riviera, right? You want to go ahead and put it just like this, right? Well, actually, you don't have to fill it out because it's all in Western characters. It uses the ABCs. However, if you are in another country, like if you're in Thailand, or your beneficiary is in Thailand or China or Japan, they will not use Western characters. So you have to get them to fill this thing out right here in their native language. So you would have to print it out, write it by hand, and then, submit it to the government. Here's asking if you are filing for your spouse the last address that you lived together. so they want to know this. Sometimes if it's an arranged marriage or you have never lived together, this will be blank, or you would type in never lived together. So remember, don't leave this thing blank. You want to fill it out, and if you've never lived together, you want to type in never lived together because it's actually in the instructions. Next question here. So either you'll fill this out or you'll fill out this part right here. They're asking you whether or not the foreign national, the beneficiary, is going overseas to have a process, or if they're trying to get their green card in the US. So if they're in the US and they want to apply for a green card while they're here, then you would fill this part out. But if they're overseas, you need to select the consulate or embassy where that individual is located. Next, you want to go out and fill this out. It says, have you ever filed a petition for anyone else? So if you are filing this for your spouse, you want to fill this out for anyone else that you previously sponsored. So it could be your parents, your siblings, children, prior spouses, ex-spouses, anyone that you previously filed an I-130 petition for, you definitely want to include it here. Next, you're going to select, if you can speak English, you're going to select this box, I can read and understand English. If you had an interpreter, you don't want to select that box, you want to put in your language here. It's asking, what language did you speak? So you see here on this form, it doesn't even allow me to type in, so you might have to write this out. So if you use an interpreter and they speak Spanish, put down the word Spanish here. And if you went to a preparer, you hired someone to help you fill this out, they should feel confident in typing in their name. So if you go somewhere and they are helping you with legal forms such as this, and they're not filling out this particular section, it means that they're being very shady, and you should be very careful in using them. If a person or a preparer is not confident in filling this out, you need to go to an attorney, because obviously that person is not the right person for you. Next is asking for the petitioner or the person filing their phone number, their mobile number, and their email address. I usually recommend that you just type in numbers. Don't do any of this. You see this right here? It's only because you see how it says entering your phone number. It didn't say enter in any brackets or dashes. Next, you want to date. Make sure you date in this format, and make sure you sign in black ink. This is very important. I believe it's in their form instructions to sign in black ink. Next here, if you use an interpreter, you want to make sure that you fill out all of the interpreter's information, again, the language that they spoke, and their signature, and make sure it's dated. And if you use a preparer, someone to help you fill out this form, you want to fill this out. And what I see sometimes is that a person will use a preparer, but they don't indicate the preparer's name, or the petitioner doesn't speak English and they don't put down an interpreter's name. This is all reason to deny a petition or state that the petition was filed fraudulently. So make sure that if the petitioner does not speak English, you fill out the interpreter information. Also make sure if someone's filling this out for you, you want to provide their information. And what I see also is that people hire a non-attorney to file these documents. Something goes wrong. Let's say, for example, they didn't put in their stepchildren as part of their children or family household, and the case gets denied later on. They try to blame it on someone else, but the government's going to look at this petition and they're going to say, look, if someone else filled this form out for you, you should have entered in that preparer's information. Since you didn't, the only person you can blame is yourself for the denial. So just remember that. And then next, the preparer's information. So that's how you fill out the I-130. The I-138 is very similar. And let me give you a few more tips about this particular application. So again, always look at the edition date and look at the bottom of the forms to see if you are filing the right edition. Also, the latest forms are always going to be here. Next, it tells you where to file the document, so make sure that you file it at the right place. The filing fee, remember, the fee is $535 as of today, but it can always change. So always double check to see what the current filing fee is. The filing fees, they usually change every 2 years, but because of COVID, the government hasn't changed the fees in a long time. However, you don't want to think it's $535 and then later on you submit it and the government denies your case because they recently updated the filing fee. Here's a checklist of required documents. Be very careful with this. I know that if you are trying to save money, be very careful, because look what the government is saying. For informational purposes only. All right, it says it's an optional tool to use to help you prepare the form, but does not replace statutory, regulatory, and form instruction requirements. So again, with this petition is telling you that if you rely on this checklist and you provide everything on here, you may still be filing it incorrectly, and your petition may be denied or rejected because you filed it incorrectly. The government is telling you that you need to read over all of the immigration regulations before filling out this form. So just keep that in mind. And this is why it's always important to use an immigration attorney if you can, because of things like this. The government puts out documents and information, and they're conflicting with what you think should happen. The next thing that you should look at is, I guess there's form tips, special instructions, and related links. So definitely, if you're doing this without an attorney, read over everything. If you're using an attorney, hopefully they're looking over everything for you. And one more thing that I would add is that if you need to contact immigration, they do have a 1-800 number. So if you click on contact them, I'm pretty sure there's a thing right here. There is a phone number, and it's the 1-800 number somewhere in here. The one thing to note is that when you call immigration, you're speaking with a customer service representative. These people are not attorneys. They're not paralegals. They're not legal assistants. What they are going to do is that if you have a question, they're going to go back on this website and they're going to try to answer the questions. So sometimes they may end up giving you inaccurate, outdated, or wrong information. And there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot call immigration if a case is denied and tell them that you relied on the customer service line, because the government's just going to tell you, they tell you ahead of time they're not an attorney. So if you had immigration related questions or legal questions, you should have hired an immigration attorney. So hopefully this video helped you out and you understand the purpose of the I-130 petition and what you can do to better safeguard on how to file it. Again, thank you for watching Winning Law. I'm attorney David Nguyen, and we hope that we have made immigration easier to understand.
At David Nguyen's Law Office, we are here to help you. We bring families together through immigration. And on the other hand, we help you find solutions. All your legal needs in the hands of people who care, who are there for you. We'll take care of your loved ones at the law office of David Nguyen.